Welcome to week 8. I hope that this week will answer a few burning questions that you have been communicating to me. One big one is, how do I plan activities and lessons for different levels of students in the classroom? And the truth is, every adult ESL classroom is multiple levels. Even if you're teaching a single level class, there are always students who are just below the average and students who are above the average. So the below average students are really struggling with it. The above average students are almost ready for the next level. At the same time, there are programs that mix levels together. So you could have a beginning class with levels 1, 2, and 3. And you could have an intermediate class with levels 4 and 5 combined. And that can definitely be challenging. Okay, I'm going to take myself out of the picture here and let's take off like these horned puffins in Alaska and talk about classroom management in adult ESL. The first thing I want you to do is to stop and think. I would like you to make a list. So get a paper and a pencil and think about what could disrupt an adult ESL class. Just make a list. And when you've got your list, come back and restart the video. Does your list look like this? Maybe you thought of some things that I haven't. Managing an adult ESL classroom does come with some challenges. There are things that can disrupt your class. They typically don't tend to be bad behavior on the part of the students like you might see with middle school or high school students. Excuse me. But they could be environmental factors, and they're disruptive nonetheless. New students being enrolled in your class after you've been teaching for a couple of weeks is one. The students could have spotty attendance, and this really does affect how well they learn. There are lots of studies that show when a student consistently comes to class, they progress faster. They could be bored, there could be cell phone issues, and you need to stop that right away. You want students to have their phones, but you want to stop them texting and doing things on their phone when they should be paying attention to you or doing the activity you've put before them. You could have material that's either too difficult or too simple, so really pay attention to how they are interacting with the materials you give them. You could have multiple levels in one class. As I said, that can be very challenging. You could have students with poor command of academic and consultative language registers. And to give you more information on these, there is a separate video this week on the language registers, what they are, and how you can explicitly teach them in adult ESL, and why you should. There could be a mismatch of learner goals and expectations. Maybe the class isn't what the students were expecting. And it happens, there could be simply a mismatch of the teacher and the student personalities. We are all human. Stop and think. I would like you to make another list of what you think can go right in an adult ESL class. When you have your list, come back and restart the video. Lots of things can go right. This is kind of a short list, but at the top of this list is classroom community and bonding. And if you've got a good, safe environment where the students are happy and they're cooperating and they're working together and they're helping each other and learning from each other, you have got a really good ESL classroom. You'll have happy students. They're self-directed. That means they're really anxiously and eagerly going out and finding ways to practice their English outside of the classroom. And they've broadened their cultural experiences by being in a classroom with people from around the world. Stop and think one more time and make a list of things, of the kinds of barriers that you think adults might face to their attendance. Not only what factors could keep them away from your class, but which factors do you have any control over? And which factors do you not have any control over? So make that list and identify the things you can control and the things you cannot control. There's 6 critical factors to managing your classroom. At the very top are enrollment policies, and I'll go through those in a minute. The demographics of the class can definitely impact how the class is managed. Learner needs and goals has an impact. Your curriculum and the location can have a big impact, and I'm going to go over location in a minute. There could be barriers to learning that some of your students are facing, and that will impact your management and how well you scaffold materials for them. And there could be cultural factors. You could have men from Saudi Arabia, for example, who will not work in a group with women. And so that's a cultural thing that you will need to be respectful of, at the same time encouraging them to begin to get comfortable working with people from the opposite gender because they're living in American society. So these are the typical reasons students say they stop coming to class. You have no control over any of these. Lack of childcare, poor health, their jobs, lack of transportation. Could be a lack of educational background and the student simply is not used to that habit of consistently going to class. And this also happens. There could be a lack of family support for that student to go to school in the first place. There could be program demands on you, the teacher, that you also have no control over. Is it a single level or a multi-level classroom? And this will impact your management strategies. Is it bilingual or monolingual? Are you allowed to use any of the student's native language, or is it English only? Is it a lab setting where you're working one-on-one or with small groups, or is it a traditional classroom setting? Do you get paid for planning time, and are there materials available to you? And are there other resources like copier machines and computers? Are any of these resources available to the students? Flexibility of space can impact your management of the class. Front Range is lucky we have dedicated classroom space. A lot of adult education programs do not, and they borrow space in public libraries and community centers. This is borrowed space. It can be challenging to work in this space, and there's usually no place where you can post student work where you can show it off. There are 3 types of enrollment, and any enrollment strategy or enrollment policies that the program that your program has is going to impact your management of the classroom. Closed enrollment is what Front Range has. You have a very narrow enrollment period, and once that's done, students may not enroll in the class after it's started. They have to wait until the next offering. Managed enrollment is pretty common in adult ed. There is an enrollment period, and then enrollment remains open on an appointment basis for new students to come in, take a test, find out their level, and start learning in the class. Now, the managed enrollment period is usually only about 2 to 3 weeks. After that, it becomes very difficult for students to come into a class and catch up. After a month, it's too difficult. So you're not doing the student any favors by saying, oh, sure, just come to class. The chances are they're going to stop coming. You will do the student a greater favor by saying, I'm sorry the class has already started, but we will enroll you for the next term. Then there is open enrollment. This is very challenging. In open enrollment, students may enroll at any time in the term. Let's talk about persistence and retention and stopping out or dropping out. Let's start with dropout. This is the term we usually use when we're talking about students who stop coming to school, and Webster's has a pretty clear definition of that. But adult students, typically, studies have shown that when they stop coming to class, they see it as a temporary break in their education, and they intend to come back. So the term stop out is typically used with adult students. Persistence is grit, right? That's that student coming to your class every day, every week. Retention is merely a number that programs have to report to funding agencies. So keep this in mind. Students persist, programs retain. But the better that student persistence is, the better your program's learner retention will be. The people who studied the adult learners and came up with the term stop out, they discovered 6 drivers of persistence. These are the things that keep the students coming despite barriers, despite difficulties and hurdles. The first one is that sense of belonging and community, and you absolutely can control this in your classroom. The second one is the clarity of purpose. So helping learners not only set their goals, but recognize progress towards their goals. A sense of agency. That means I can do it on my own. So a learner-centered environment where you step back as the learning facilitator and give students the opportunity to practice independently on their own, to do it on their own. They need a sense of competence. They need to believe that they can do it. And that takes a teacher who doesn't give up on them, even though they might want to give up on themselves. We know that what you're teaching needs to be relevant to them. It needs to be English that they can use. And program stability is huge. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard about classes being offered by a local nonprofit where the student showed up for class and the teacher didn't show up. So you want to have a stable program where the students feel safe to take risks. What can you impact? Your classroom and how you teach your material. That's it. So helping students establish classroom rules. Get them to buy into the classroom rules. Phones are on silent or vibrate during class. Use them only when instructed by the teacher. You can take an emergency call, but you leave the classroom and take that out in the hallway. We will not stop the class for that. Know your material and be very well prepared with a good lesson plan. You want to meet the learner's needs, and this means knowing what their needs are. So you've got to have a conversation with them. You want to plan to all of the learning modalities and know who your community partners are, because if there's an outside barrier keeping the student from class, maybe you can assist that student in locating a community service that can help them overcome that barrier. Learner confidence is something you can help bolster in class, and teach to the lowest ability in the class. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But plan your lesson to the lowest performing learner in your class, and then have extra materials on hand for the people who finish more quickly. Adjust your instruction material to the needs of the learner by simplifying tasks, scaffolding, using lots of comprehensible input. Before I go into chunking, I would like you to look at that graphic, that picture. Simply giving students equal access to the same material is not equitable education. You need to scaffold materials so that they have equal access to succeeding with those materials. A scaffolding and brain-based strategy is chunking. So chunking means breaking a big task into small steps. Maybe you don't have to read all of this news story today. Maybe you only do half of it and really give the students a chance to do a deep dive into that first part of that story. And then they're very curious about how the story is going to end, and they're more likely to come back to class tomorrow. But break big tasks into small tasks. Give the students a checklist so they can check off tasks as they finish them. Because after all, how do we eat an elephant? Here are your words of wisdom. It is easier to increase the difficulty of an activity for the fast finishers than it is to simplify a task that is too difficult. Once you have given a difficult task to a student who is not up to it, that student's affective filter is going to go up. They're going to start to shut down. Plan your lesson to those lower performing students in the class and have more challenging activities for the fast finishers in your class so that once they have completed the task, you can give them something else to do while the lower students are finishing. Be prepared with a good lesson plan with well-established and clearly written objectives, well-designed materials, you've got a great classroom environment, you're meeting the needs of your learners, and this might seem like a big duh, but learn everyone's names. I was so embarrassed one time to watch a colleague handing out end-of-the-year certificates to students who had been in her class for 2 semesters, and she did not know how to pronounce their names. Learn your students' names and learn them quickly. Maximize involvement with different grouping strategies, and we have a task about this week. Now, you can do it randomly. In a large class, you can give everybody a popsicle stick and they write their name on that stick. Then you collect the popsicle sticks, keep them in a cup, and then just randomly pull them out, and that's how you pair students together. Or you can group students together deliberately, like all of my lower students are together, the intermediate students are together, the fast finishers are together. Or you group them by mixed abilities so that those lower performing students learn from the higher performing students. And it's okay sometimes to tell students, choose your own partner for practice. You might be teaching in an English-only classroom, and this has a huge impact on your classroom management. Teaching only in English means it's equitable to all students. So use a lot of scaffolding and realia and comprehensible input. Simplify your teacher language. Teach them how to use a dictionary so they can learn the definitions of new words, and teach them how to use and be comfortable with clarification strategies, such as, could you please repeat that? I'm sorry, I don't understand. Teaching in an English-only environment is equitable for all students. If I speak Spanish with my Spanish-speaking students, it is not equitable unless I also speak Chinese or Russian or Korean. So to make it equitable for all students, remind them, everybody wants to learn English, let's speak English only. This week I've got a lot for you. You've got chapter 7 and it's a long one, it's 32 pages. But then I've got a short little thing for you to read called Teaching Multi-Level Classes, and it is packed with strategies for this. I've got a short independent study course for you on positive error correction. 2 videos besides this one on how to do your lesson plan evaluations, because those are due on Friday. And then the other one is on language registers. Instructions for the Padlet are coming. This is where you're going to post an idea for pairing or grouping students. Submit your lesson plan evaluation measures, and then you've got discussions and the reflective journals. Let me show you the Padlet. This is it. This is the link, and this is the QR code, and these are both in D2L. This is what the Padlet looks like. It's an online bulletin board, and basically you add a sticky note and you write on the sticky note. But you can see, you can upload graphics and pictures, you can embed videos if you want. So either describe a pairing and grouping strategy that you have seen used or have used yourself, or go to the internet and Google pairing and grouping strategies for adult ESL and find a strategy that looks really fun and tell us about it in the Padlet. And you can post more than one. Let's get a big list here, and it will stay open for the rest of the semester. Finally, did you write down your answer to the question that I asked? Mistakes are different from errors. How are they different? If you forgot to write it down, send me an internal message and I will send your answer to you. From now, for the rest of the week, I would like you to add to that answer, but add to it in a different color ink. Make note of what you got right, what ideas were basically match what you learned this week, and make note of the ideas that maybe you had a misunderstanding. And not only that, identify the information you have learned that corrects it. And then bring this paper to class on Saturday. Looking ahead, you've got your lesson plan evaluations due Friday, icebreaker demos on the 26th. I see I have a little typo there. Your full lesson plan is going to be due on November 1st. An essay describing the 2 classrooms that you observed on the 15th. There will be instructions coming for that. You're going to demonstrate a teaching technique on the 16th in class. Your Flipgrid video lesson is going to be due on the 22nd of November. And then on November 23rd in class, I will bring materials and you can start designing and putting together your posters for your poster presentations on December 7th. Here's some resources for this. Finally, I'll come back and say, oh, that was a long video. So there's your video lecture, but you can repeat this as many times as you need. You've got a lot of work to do this week. I'll see you in D2L, and then I'll see you next Saturday in class. Bye-bye.